You're on this podcast for one of two reasons. One, you're my English teacher. Two, my English teacher referred this to you. But anyways, we're going to get straight into this. So today, we will be analyzing Macbeth by Shakespeare. Now, I understand Shakespeare isn't the most favored. I know. I've taken an English class with pessimists who hate his language, and I'm not gonna lie, I was one of those people, to be frank with you, but this is a grade. So before I jump into this, I'm gonna give you a picture. I'm gonna give you some context. I want you to close your eyes. If you're married, I want you to picture your significant other with your children, and you as the queen, or whatever gender you are, I don't care. Are you doing that? Cool. Now I want you to imagine your significant other or your crush or whomever you admire as a king, with a staff in his hand or sitting on a throne, however you interpret royalty. We all have our own imaginations, which is why the world is so great. But anyways, now picture your significant other stabbing you multiple times, and I know that image is really morbid, but literally that's Macbeth, that's William Shakespeare, and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody listening to this podcast, but that's the best image I can really plant into your head right now, because it gives you a good idea of what you're in for. You know, context is really important, and literally Macbeth is just endless death, lots of murder, lots of blood. It's disgusting, but you know, William Shakespeare, give it up for William Shakespeare, a gruesome guy. I do not know why this is in the curriculum, Act 3. So as I'm reading this, I want you to follow along with me. Open your collections book to page 245. Follow along with me, okay? All right, cool. Act 3. I'm fully aware that my voice cracked right there, but I do not care. All right, so Act 3, quick rundown. So we now know that Macbeth is determined and driven to fulfill this prophecy of the witches by any means necessary, even if it means taking more lives and staining his expensive blouse that Lady Macbeth probably bought for him. Anyway, scene 1. We're at Macbeth's palace, and there are words exchanged between Macbeth and his dear beloved friend Banquo, and that can only be described as lies and deception. Not on Banquo's part, but Macbeth's part. So Macbeth invites him to the royal banquet that he's preparing with his wife, and Banquo's like, hey, yeah, I'll be there. But first, I'm going to be riding out of town for a little bit. Got to get some errands done, you know, soldierly like things. And Macbeth is like, yeah, my good man, I love you, bro. And Banquo's like, my king, I'm forever loyal to you. I won't let you down. So then Banquo clocks out of there on his little horsey, and Macbeth clocks in the murderers. So after Banquo makes his exit, he brings in these murderers and explains to them that Banquo being alive is not only a detriment to him, Macbeth, but to everybody in Scotland. And his goal here is to persuade the 3 murderers to take on the assignment to kill Banquo. Assignment like it's homework. I mean, if you really think about it, Shakespeare portrays these murderers in a way that makes them seem like idiots, like they're gullible. But who knows? For all we know, they could be teenagers. And we all know that teenagers hate doing their homework, you know? Yeah, so Macbeth is telling them, as long as Banquo's alive, you're gonna go broke. Everything bad that happens to you is Banquo's fault. Your life will suck even more than it already does, so just kill him, you good-for-nothing imbeciles. And by the end of that scene, they agreed to murder him. It was that easy. So now we get into scene 2. At this point, I expect you, or you should be on page 249. Alright, now we're on scene 2. So Macbeth just completed handing his assignments to the 3 murderers and enters the palace, meeting his apprehensive wife, Lady Macbeth. So they engage in dialogue, and Lady Macbeth is having a moment where she has a quasi-breakdown over her husband's actions as of lately. So they're planning a royal banquet. They're inviting a bunch of nobles. It's going to be really, elegant. It's formal, you know. It's going to be great. And let me give you an example of what's really going on here. What's the atmosphere? So say you and your significant other are planning to host a party where he has to dance. There's no dance party without dancing, of course. Like how there can't be a banquet without a Macbeth, or a banquet without a bank. Whoa, I get it. Anyways, so you're planning your dance party, but 30 minutes prior, your husband breaks his leg and starts saying a bunch of weird things he wouldn't normally say. And you're like, honey, people are coming in 30 minutes. Can you please arrange the chairs, arrange the plates, get everything together, please? And she's totally disregarding the fact that Macbeth is about to commit indirect murder to Banquo. And it's gonna be really bad. So now Lady Macbeth is concerned over where the heck Macbeth's mind is at. There's a party in 30 minutes, Auntie's coming over, we gotta be in our best behavior, and Macbeth is going a little crazy. So now we move on to scene 3. At this point, you should be on page 251. Yes, let's go. To begin scene 3, I'm gonna say a little joke. What did the murderers say as they were killing Banquo? Banquo! Yeah, so pretty much Banquo dies in this scene, that's it. So at this point, you should be on page 252. Scene 4, it's party time, so all the nobles are in the house. Everybody's getting themselves settled, preparing to have a nice little feast. And we all know that Macbeth is the only one in the room who is on edge. To be honest, it only gets worse from here. So Macbeth sees the first murder at the door, and he's notified that Banquo is killed. However, let me tell a joke. What do you call Fleance after his dad died? Fleance! Get it. Flee, go, escape, flee. Anyways, so Fleance was able to get away, and Macbeth gets really bad anxiety because who knows where he's gonna go? What is he gonna do? Who is he gonna tell? What is he gonna do with this information? And then Lady Macbeth calls after Macbeth because he has a party to host and he's mingling at the door like a bad party host. But Macbeth is now even more on edge than ever because 1, Banquo's dead, but Fleance got away. 2, Macbeth, he's insane. Like, that's it. That's it. So now the royal banquet commences, and they're doing their cheers and whatnot, whatever people do at parties. But Macbeth starts hallucinating Banquo's ghost, and this can be symbolic of Macbeth's guilt towards his pursuit of power, because we all know the pursuit of power for Macbeth has just been endless blood, slaying, death, killing families, ripping families apart, ripping Scotland, horrible things. And if I were you, I don't know, I would be pretty guilty of this. So Macbeth sees Banquo sitting in his chair and he starts freaking out. And everybody there is like, uh-oh, this man ain't good. What's going on? Ooh. And of course, Lady Macbeth has to take blows for this because that's her husband. So she starts trying to cover up what's going on and trying to settle everyone down like the good lady she is. So let me tell a little funny story right quick. So last year, I was invited to a birthday party at this buffet, and the party was dedicated to this 8-year-old. And she clearly had some form of social anxiety or whatever because every time we would sing happy birthday to her, she would hide under the table and her dad was laughing. But we all knew deep down he was extremely embarrassed, just like Lady Macbeth. And then Lady Macbeth is trying to calm him down by questioning his masculinity, like she always does when he tries to do something that she doesn't like. Like, like the great wife she is, am I right? So pretty much the rest of the scene is just back and forth between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth until she sends the rest of the people home. And then after everyone leaves, she's like, "You, sir, are an idiot for embarrassing me. Go to sleep." And I'm pretty sure many of my married ladies can relate to that, if you know what I'm saying. So at this point, you should be on scene 5. So pretty much here, we have the 3 witches and their boss, Hecate. So pretty much Hecate scolds the 3 witches for telling Macbeth the prophecy without her. She's like, "You guys, first of all, I'm your boss. Why didn't y'all call upon me to tell the prophecy? Second of all, y'all shouldn't. I didn't give you consent to do this, and I didn't want you to do it. Macbeth is a fool. Why would you waste your time and power on Macbeth? Really? Ew. So pretty much that's scene 5. It's just Hecate scolding the witches for being ugly. Yep. So scene 6. Lennox and the Lord are discussing the events, the murders, this and that. They're suspecting Macbeth, and they're also suspecting Malcolm and Donald Bane for killing Duncan, supposedly. Maybe Fleance killed Banquo, who knows? They're just discussing possibilities, what could have happened, and that's pretty much it. Just a bunch of suspicion and all that stuff. And that was Act 3. That was personally my favorite act, just because the story really begins to develop and progress here, as many different themes are being developed, such as fate and guilt. Macbeth, in the beginning of Act 3, turns his back against Banquo simply because he didn't like his fate. Remember, Banquo's issues or children were Macbeth's successors to take on the throne after him, and Macbeth didn't like this for 2 reasons. 1. Macbeth doesn't want to not be king, obviously. 2. Macbeth killing Duncan at this point wasn't for him, but for his successors. By killing Duncan, he only expedited the process for Banquo's issues to take on the throne after him. And this really fueled Macbeth with envy and anger, because Macbeth didn't have any kids to pass on his titles down onto. In Act 3, Scene 1, Macbeth says in lines 67 to 70, I gotta clear my throat. Only for them, in mine eternal jewel, give to the common enemy of man, to make them kings, the seeds of Banquo's kings. Rather than so, come fate into the list, and champion me to the utterance. Who's there? The line, and champion me to the utterance, is so important because that line, it developed Macbeth's character even further. Now we know he's willing to challenge his fate. He's willing to go against the witch's prophecies for his own interests, even if it means killing more people. But let me pose a question for my listeners to think about. Can we change our fate through our free will? Is our destiny fixed? Do both work together? Something I notice in myself and other people is that whenever something goes wrong, we're quick to say everything happens for a reason. Are we fated to go through certain things in our life that we can't change? I'm 50-50 just because I feel like we go through things because we act upon our free will. Our free will leads to our destiny. We have multiple fates that depend on how we practice our free will. The 2 aspects go hand in hand. For example, say I'm about to cross the street, but I have 2 crosswalks I can choose from. If I choose the one on my left, I'll get hit and die. But if I choose the one on my right, I'll buy ice cream and get a cavity. The issue with this, though, is that we don't know our fate or destiny until we go through it. That's why people like me, extremely intuitive, can feel my fate unfold before me, to which I then utilize my free will to get the best out of my fate. And I don't mean fight my fate. What I mean is, what steps can I take to prevent extreme shock factor? Here's an example. For example, I had a crush on this boy this year, but I kept getting these signs from the universe that told me it wasn't reciprocal, and my intuition just told me he likes someone else. And months later, that's exactly what happened. When you feel something in your gut, that's your intuition talking to you. And I promise you, your intuition is always right 98% of the time. Another example, you know how you're taking a test and you go with your gut and the initial answer is correct, but then you change it and it's wrong and you're like, wow, I should have went with my gut. That's this. But yeah. And as hard as I tried to convince myself I could change this, I knew I couldn't. So instead of pursuing him, I kept things pretty platonic, but at the same time I wasn't, just in case it was reciprocal. And let me just say, I'm a Catholic, so I believe that God, he sends me warning signs that warns me of my fate, and it's up to me to use my free will to fulfill the potential of my destiny. So I'm currently reading a book about Cleopatra's daughter, And she says something that really corroborates the theme of fate in Macbeth. Celine says, "But how is it free will if mankind is commanded to choose a certain way? That's like if I held two hands out for you to choose. In one, I held a pearl, in the other, an emerald. If I commanded you to choose the pearl, then you are not choosing freely. Yes?" Her teacher responds, "It is the discernment, the knowledge of good and evil. That is the heart of free will." And how does this tie to Macbeth? Macbeth had options laid out in front of him when he was given his prophecy. He could have done what he said in the beginning, which was to not do anything and let his fate come to him, or he could have fought his fate, which was the path he took. And I feel Macbeth. I really do. I really like that guy. But once you know your fate, it's a wrap. If you try to fight your fate, you are bound to end up in a bad place. And this story or play really attests to that claim. Macbeth was fated to be succeeded by Banquo's issues, and that was that. And he killed Banquo. You see where that led him? And the thought that my life is already predetermined is pretty scary. But that's why I say, use your free will wisely. And I wish I could tell Macbeth that, but he did. Now, there's something Macbeth says in his little soliloquy in scene 1 that is indicative of his situation. I'm currently reading this book called Cleopatra's Moon, and it really reminds me of Macbeth. Act 3, Scene 1, lines 54 to 56. "My genius is rebuked, as it is said. Mark Antony's was by Caesar. Mark Antony in this case is Macbeth, and Caesar is Banquo and his issues." So, the history of the Roman Empire, it's honestly so funny in my opinion because Shakespeare's plays are indicative of events that happened in the era of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. And here's some background. In 46 BC, Julius Caesar was named dictator of Rome and needed an heir, so he adopted Octavius Caesar. Then, Julius Caesar unfortunately died, but that meant Octavius could take after him. Now that Octavius had the power to make big boy decisions, he formed an alliance between him and Mark Antony. And together they fought a really bloody war, and they split the lands between the two. Octavius took Rome, while Mark Antony took Egypt. So you see here that the two had a really good treaty, and they're in good partnership. And then, Mark Antony on the side had on and off marital issues, but then he got himself together and got back with Cleopatra, and they settled in Alexandria, Egypt, where they had a happy royal family with lots of land and lots of titles. But unfortunately, people in Rome saw Cleopatra as a threat in the sense that she could use her seductiveness as means to get land and power. And I don't know about you, but that reminds me a little somebody we know. But anyways, due to this extreme tension in the public, Octavius declared war on Cleopatra. And before the couple could attack, Octavius got to them first. And before you knew it, Cleopatra and Mark Antony committed suicide. And I would reference Romeo and Juliet here, but this is about Macbeth. So you can see how this is somewhat indicative of Macbeth in two ways. Both Macbeth and Banquo, just as Mark Antony and Octavius did, were really fortunate. But when a lady was introduced, everything went downhill. In this case, it would be Lady Macbeth. And this isn't in Act 3, but I feel like it needs to be addressed. Lady Macbeth and Cleopatra would have amazing conversations about their love life until they killed themselves. Anyways, both Lady Macbeth and Cleopatra would use means of seduction to have things done their way. Lady Macbeth did who knows what to Macbeth to get him to kill Duncan and pursue more power. And Cleopatra did the exact same thing to put a ring on it, to be bestowed Queen of Egypt and Queen of Kings. And I'm telling you, those two would be best friends. They may have not existed in the same time period, but just imagine the phone calls they would have. Like, ring, ring, Cleo, what's up? Guess what Macbeth just did for me? Girl, what he do? He just killed someone. And then they cackle in unison. And then Cleo's like, girl, guess what Mark just bought for me? And she's like, he just bought me the entire land of Egypt. And they're just going on and on about their love lives and their husbands and what they got for Christmas, whatever. And the second way is how Macbeth feared Banquo just as Mark Antony feared Octavius. Banquo being alive meant that Macbeth would lose his power, just like how Mark Antony was going to lose his land and titles at the hand of Octavius. Both Macbeth and Anthony put up a good fight, but, they lost. That was their sad, unfortunate fate. But I hope you enjoyed today's podcast with yours truly. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.